So welcome, Kenny, and thank you so much for accepting this invitation to participate in our PrevTalks, a podcast and videocast about prevention and promotion of mental health at work. And for our community to get to know you, because I know you for a few years now, it will be very interesting for them to understand a little bit your background, your experience, and also your Portuguese backgrounds and roots.
Portuguese, yes. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure being here. Actually, a little bit of an honor to be here. It's always great to share our knowledge around prevention, around mental health with people. I think awareness is super important and really a first step when it comes to taking care of our own well-being. So Kenny Medeiros. I have been in the industry for a little over 15 years. I'll talk about my personal background afterwards. I do have a Portuguese background, but my professional background, 15 years in the industry, working primarily with one of the largest global EAPs out there. Funny enough, did not know EAPs existed until I actually started working for this company. So it was quite an interesting start to my career. But over the years, really working, on the sales and account management side, but really also working internally with different departments, including our operations. It was a Canadian company, but then that really went onto the international stage, and I was really very intimately involved in that international stage growth and bringing that forward. So working a lot with clients, with partners, other EAPs, etc., to really bring forward, one of the best programs that you could find out there. I do have a background in sales and account management. I do have a background in project management. Those are really my niche. But of course, you can imagine working 15 years alongside excellent psychologists and counselors, etc. Inevitably, I have become a little bit of a counselor myself without the credential.
Yeah, and also passionate about psychology and how
exactly. I mean, that's what brought forward is understanding other people. I think. And understanding what that means to yourself too. So it's been, it brought out a passion I did not know I had, which was quite interesting.
So as you know, I'm also very passionate about our field of work and the type of interventions. But when we talk about EAPs, employee assistance programs, now I think even in Portugal, it's more known, but for many, many years, it was like an American concept, right? A very American concept. And you are the right person, as you are now president of the European Assistant Forum for employee assistance. What is exactly an EAP?
An EAP, it's an interesting question. It's a difficult question to answer because it depends on the perspective of the person. Depends on the market you're in as well. You mentioned earlier, North America, where it was a North American concept, which is very true. An EAP was developed originally to provide support for individuals that had alcohol issues in the automotive industry. So it was really considered back then as a tool to help people with alcohol problems, which is not the case anymore, right? And it's evolved so much over the years. The best way I find to describe an EAP is a program that's put in place in the workplace, right? To give access to individuals to support for when they need it. Now, the when they need it part is where it can actually be very different from one place to the next. People assume that when we say when you need it is when you're feeling stressed, depressed, suicidal, and you need to contact and talk to a counselor in that moment. And it's very true. That is a great moment and definitely an excellent moment to use a service. But really, when you need it is when life happens, right? We feel stress every day. We feel worries every day. We're going through all these different changes that we're trying to adapt. We turn on the news, we go on the internet. There's so many negative things that are coming at us. And it's sometimes hard to cope. Or sometimes we know there's something that's going to change in our lives in the future. For example, starting a family for the first time. You're going to have your first baby. Those of you who have children know, right, that when you have your first child, it's scary. It's really scary. You're happy, but you're scared. This is actually an excellent time to call the EAP to prepare for that change, right? So an EAP is a support tool, and that can take, support can take a lot of different ways. It can be counseling, but it can be literature. It can be things that you're reading. It could be things that you're listening to, videos that you're watching, trainings that you can take, right? It can also be, and it's not just for people for personal issues, but some of you out there are managers. And as a manager, sometimes you have issues that you're trying to help somebody else with, or even on a personal level. It could be that, oh, my brother is going through a really bad divorce. How can I help him? How can you give me some advice to help my brother? Because that's stressing me out that he's going through such a difficult time, right? So it is a support tool that's put in place, but it's not just about the counseling. It's not just about talking to a psychologist, although that is the biggest portion of the support. It's the idea of getting help, and it's important that it's the workplace that's bringing it forward, right? And it's free, it's confidential, etc. So that is what an EAP is, and it's meant to help with any type of issue, not just those super negative ones that we associate to mental health. Mental health is much broader.
Yes. And as you said, it's quite, it can be actually preventive, not just remediative. So like not just a tertiary intervention when people are not already feeling okay. And I remember when I came for the first EPAS conference, they insisted on this core technology of EAP that goes also to management advisement, to a lot of education, to promotion of mental health literacy, and then to give access to care. And enable it in a free and safe and confidential way that actually could build and then help people navigate change, whether it's professional or personal change, as you described. It was actually, not very known in Europe, but Europe kind of developed differently, right? In your perception, Europe actually, as a European market for this kind of solutions, actually evolved in a very different way, right?
Definitely, and it continues to evolve in a very different way. What's interesting is it's even within Europe, different countries evolved in different ways. And it all has to do, I will say, with the healthcare systems in the different countries, right? When you compare even, we'll take North America, for example, comparing Canada to the US, EAP is different in Canada and the US. Why? The healthcare systems are different. How, EAPs very often actually are a layer on top of what your national healthcare or private healthcare can provide you when it comes to mental health. And that's where it makes a big difference. So in certain countries, healthcare has mandated and very strong mental health services in place. So if you look at our Scandinavian countries, EAP usage tends to be quite low for counseling. Why? Because their national healthcare systems have so many resources available that people don't need to use EAP for counseling. You see that in other areas of the world, like in Argentina, etc. But then you have other countries where, I'll take Canada as an example, that being my home country, where actually the healthcare system struggled providing mental health supports. So
and
the
Portugal
workplace
too,
in Portugal as
for
well,
different reasons, but it struggles also.
So then what happens is the workplace steps up and says, in Canada, that's really what happened. The workplace steps up saying, well, we need to do something. So let's get mental health support on our own. That's where EAPs came from. In Portugal and a lot of European countries, what we've seen is the entry point for mental health support in the workplace came through occupational health. So now all of a sudden, it's a different way of accessing the service. It's not the traditional way that you normally would have done in EAP, because as an employee of an organization, you're told any health-related issue you have related to the workplace, mental or physical, go see your occupational health. And then they lead you to EAP services or counseling services or health services, whatever it is, right? So you see that development quite different. As in countries where occupational health is very strong, Portugal being one, the Netherlands, Germany, etc., you're seeing mental health or EAP access happening a lot because of occupational health.
Yes,
but then
and
other
a lot of
areas,
I would say a lot of involvement of the occupational doctor and the occupational
exactly,
team in order to detect, because they have to perform an obligatory evaluation, and sometimes they referral to the EAP or any psychologist that is ready to do the intake of the employee.
Yeah.
In some cases, and we've discussed this privately also, there's this conception that EAP actually will end. And we discussed this, like it's the end of the EAP. I remember that you talked to that in a conference, there was someone saying EAP is dead.
EAP is dead.
How do you see the future? Because there's a lot of diversity, I think, even within companies that provide EAP service, whether in North America, whether in Europe, whether around the world, actually in Asia, in other continents. there are a lot of differences, so it's
Mhm.
not just one specific product or one specific way of doing business.
Yeah.
How do you see, this field and this sector, which is a sector, evolving in the future?
So I will say that that person who made the comment, that EAP is dead, and they just made it as a comment. It's not necessarily what they believe, but they just wanted to start a conversation. I would say they were both right and wrong at the same time. EAP, in its traditional sense, in its very narrow sense of you call this phone number and you get 5 or 6 sessions of counseling, and that's it. That will die because mental health has evolved, awareness has evolved, support tools have evolved. But the idea of EAP, the concept of EAP, of a program that is there to provide assistance to employees, which is what EAP stands for, Employee Assistance Program, that is not dead. The traditional model, it's not dead either, but it fits a very specific need at a very specific time, which is great, but it needs to be broader. So when we look at, we talk about, I'm president of the Employee Assistance European Forum. We're not the Employee Assistance Program European Forum. It's employee assistance. And that's the key thing, right? Employee assistance is not dead. Employee assistance is actually more alive now than it ever was, because due to quite a few world events over the last few years, awareness around mental health at the individual level around the world has gone up. Countries that we never imagined would talk about mental health suddenly start talking about it. And so to me, employee assistance is definitely not dead. But if you as an organization, when I look at our members, if you remain in that little box of the traditional EAP that has telephone intake only, with only providing short-term counseling only, you will not survive, because now people understand they need more in different ways. Organizations understand more. Before, organizations had no concept of EAP or mental health. They relied on EAPs and other providers to tell them or how to deal with that. But now they understand. You're seeing more and more HR professionals that have studied psychology, that have studied mental health as part of their educational background, and they're in HR or they're in the benefits team. So they understand the needs and they understand what they want to buy. And we're seeing that where EAPs now are actually becoming much broader in their offering, providing both the traditional and the digital, providing unconventional ways of support, because that market makes more sense. In some markets, short-term counseling is great. In other markets, it's not. In some places, in person is fantastic. But in certain markets, you know what? You're better off with telephone or video. You'll get much more usage, right? So you need to be more agile. You need to be much more open. And the generational gaps are extremely different. If you look at the baby boomers, have a very specific way of how they access support, a lot more private, a lot more, insular. But the younger generation, they talk about mental health support, mental health openly with their friends, with everybody. They talk, they're much more open about it.
Yeah, there's no stigma. There's no
A
stigma
lot less stigma,
ask for
which is both
support.
good and bad. Which is both good and bad.
Yeah.
Because,
but as you say, you need to broaden your approach, and then, innovation also in the way that you provide your services, and actually go much more beyond than the individual counseling, short-term counseling format, but actually intervening with the organizational itself, with its practice, with its leadership. And that's something that organizations are needing more and more, because they really want to manage it differently, and they understood that it's not just an individual issue that we need to take care outside of the organization, but work itself also presented in these last years a lot of challenges, right? So prevention also happens in the workplace, and with building other solutions. I tend to totally agree with you, and it's interesting because I think legislation always push countries actually to really acknowledge the importance of mental health at work, and actually the organization has some kind of social responsibility for its people and for human sustainability. And now actually in Europe, with the new directive for sustainability reporting, it's getting more and more clear that this is serious. This is not something that they can just keep it under the rug, just say that, oh, we have a good offer of benefits and that's it. No, the organization itself needs to be responsible, and it needs to show that it can improve, right?
Definitely. And we actually saw that at our last conference in Luxembourg in June, where we actually had the European Commission come and speak about a framework that they put in place, making it mental health part of workplace safety, right? Making that something that's really, it's now not just a social responsibility, but it's actually a responsibility of the organization from a health and safety perspective, that mental health is also covered.
Of course.
Right. And we're seeing that framework coming in across Europe. So legislation does push things forward, but it doesn't matter how much legislation you put, right? It doesn't matter, the organization can do it whatever it wants to promote it and etc. We still need people to call. We still need people to access those services. And that goes back to awareness. And earlier you made you used an interesting word when you described EAP. You used a safe place, right? EAP is a safe place. And let's talk about that for a second, because we just mentioned, that younger generation openly talking about mental health, etc. And I said that can be dangerous. Well, what it can be dangerous is that if I'm talking to my friends about my mental health, my friends are giving me advice. They're not mental health professionals. If I'm watching TikToks about mental health, if I'm watching YouTube videos, if I'm reading random articles on BuzzFeed or whatever about mental health, those are not necessarily the most reliable sources, because who's actually providing that information? Is it a clinician? Is it somebody who is safe,
trained to do so, right?
Trained to do so, etc., experienced to do so? Or is it, it's like getting, relationship advice from a magazine? It's not necessarily the best place to get that sort of information. Whereas an EAP has a responsibility to provide accurate, verified information and advice from trained professionals. So although I encourage people to obviously talk about mental health, etc., but when you're dealing with your mental health, go to a reputable source. I don't want to say anything bad about TikTok, but it's not social media that is the most reliable source when it comes to getting support. So it's
true. And even if mental health becomes, in this past few years, I think mental health becomes very catchy, and a lot of organizations were just talking about mental health as an employee branding approach, not exactly doing a lot, but inviting people over, just talking about their own burnout is not the way to approach and to really give people more knowledge or more literacy or more skills how to handle their challenges in the daily work. And I think EAPs there, or the companies working in this field, can actually differentiate from approaches that are not technically and sounded in evidence, and EAP is not new, it's a very, very researched approach within the organizational setting and work setting. And if we look at all the studies, all the, not just return on investment, but also the impact that we have in terms of effectiveness, in terms of intervention. But sometimes managers don't know this, It's our role also, and I think I'm part of the board of EAEF also, it's to educate the market to really understand the difference. It's not just an app. And this brings me to the question about technology, because we see a lot of, the trend is about bots, it's about artificial intelligence conveying EAP service. You just talk to a bot, you just have some automated and very, a treatment plan that is completely organized by artificial intelligence. What is your perspective on this, and your insights about how can EAP respond to these needs, but still how technology will play a role, and how we can, really use this in our favor also as professionals?
I mean, technology in the history of humanity has always done two things, right? It's improved lives and made lives more difficult. Email was great when it first came out, and now anybody you ask about email wish it was never invented. It all comes back to how technology is used and how it was developed. A lot of people are afraid about AI. Oh my God, AIs are going to replace counselors, or AIs are going to replace this and that. The reality is that to a certain degree, maybe, but I don't think it will replace. I think at the end of the day, ask anyone, do you want to talk to another human being, or do you want to talk to a robot? Right? And most people would say, I'd rather talk to a human being. Maybe not face to face, but if they would rather interact with a human versus than an artificial, automated service. Now, that being said, AI could maybe help the counselor, right? I'm, talking to an individual who, they're going through some difficulties, etc. I'm not sure what my next approach would be with them. They're still not progressing. Maybe I can consult with an AI that has access to case notes or something from other counselors that have gone through the same thing. And maybe that AI can give me some advice. And I, as a trained professional, understanding the specific context of this individual, can use that advice and tailor my treatment plan with that individual based on, it's almost like talking to another person, right? From that perspective, it could be quite interesting to have AI integrated, but I can't see anything in the short term replacing. And we saw that when we started seeing a lot of chatbots or a lot of online only, huge spike at the beginning, and then all of a sudden people are starting to say, you know what?
Yeah,
they want to go back. They want to go back to the more traditional.
And I think it's also, combining. I totally agree with you. And I've seen several applications to really guide the therapists when they are video conferencing with the client, and to give them insight, like suggestions, prompts that you can actually clarify, because the AI actually has access to a lot of notes, as you're saying, and a lot of case records, and can actually, make more present to the therapist things that at the moment perhaps he's not accessible in his own brain. But it could improve his treatment and his approach to the client. I totally agree with you. And I think, as you said, it's even important. It will not substitute, but it will give that advantage to the ones that are using it, because it will make them better at approaching the challenges of the individuals, better trained, better focused, and more in tune. One thing also I think interesting is that we don't want to talk with perfection. So also a lot of our dialectic interventions and even conversations with managers, even trainings, even, clinical advisement and counseling, what we see is that imperfections make us relate to each other. So it's not just about being correct, it's also about the ability to feel that the other person is human in his own, shortcomings, or is not perfect at all as we are. And this actually is something that we study in the therapeutic relationship, and it works for a lot of different kind of relationships. We need this kind of unpredictability and, not so serious. And we've seen this in sectors that were very quick to adapt to automated, such as, a lot of coffees and restaurants that had and retail shops that had only automated machines for checkout, and they are going back because people they don't shop there. They prefer to shop to the ones, even if they have not many people, giving client service, they prefer someone that they can ask question or can relate to anyone.
Exactly. It's feeling related, as you said, relatable to somebody. And especially when you're looking at in a therapeutic, relationship, you want to feel as if that individual on the other side might be able to relate to the path that you've taken. They say walk a mile in a man's shoes, right? That person I can relate to because they've had similar experiences to me. A perfect AI, a chatbot, they can't relate to what I'm going through. They don't know what I felt. They don't know that the pain that comment that person made to me had, right? And
it doesn't feel the same way as they say, I understand what you're feeling. It's not the same. That they have not a lived experience of anything similar to what we're describing.
Exactly.
Which is something interesting, because we see that this bot has this kind of, I think, a movie therapist speech, the ones that we see in movies. Like, I understand that you are, so it's very robotic, but there's no emotional charge there. You will not feel the connection.
Exactly.
I agree. But I agree with you in terms of access to information that could be tailor-made, organized, and could give even, if someone just wants to ask a quick question, it doesn't need to call someone. It just, it has right away any information about access, which is something very important nowadays, to really give access to the service when people need it, not just when they are feeling sick, but much, much before they are feeling
Yeah.
sick, when they just feel challenged, as you said.
Yeah.
And I do see technology helping EAPs to spread and overboard. And I can't but be an optimistic. When I started working in this field, I remember going, to the United States and saying, oh, there's really a sector here. So this is really a business. This is really something that it's not like outlier.
Yeah.
People in Portugal trying to do something very, very weird. And the field has evolved so much. And the knowledge within many European markets, as we've watched, and growth of the importance of having psychology as a science to work for the organization, for the individuals, for the team management. And it's getting more, I think, I'm quite an optimistic, but of course we never know. There will be an eye that solves everything, and nobody needs
No.
to hire psychologists anymore.
I mean, and you said like that evolution is key, and what we have seen in Portugal and Europe is just the increased awareness is the key thing, right? So when we're talking, managers being more aware, managers openly talking about mental health and people taking care of themselves and making the workplace safe, and for people to feel like comfortable using these services is really important. So I'm hoping, technology will also help managers a little bit more, the same way they would be able to help counselors. And it's not necessarily for them to tell the manager what to do, but make the manager think about what they should do, like any individual, right? So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Funny enough that you brought up this subject because, a little bit of a sneak preview for the audience here, but that is one of the themes that we will be addressing at this year's conference for the EAEF, is actually how technology will factor into EAP mental health and the impact the traditional treatment pathways that we were looking at. So it'll be interesting to see how this conversation evolves as well next June at our conference.
Yes, so we invite everyone to come, right?
Yes, of course.
To the EAEF conference in Prague in June.
Correct, yeah.
So to end our amazing conversation, Kenny, we have just a more personal question for you. How do you see yourself working in, 2030?
That's a really good question. And I'll be honest, I'm hoping by 2030, I have found a way to retire. That would be the ideal situation, even though I am a little bit of a workaholic. I find that, I'm working a lot with organizations around their strategy for development within their country or internationally, etc. And I'm seeing myself relying a lot on technology to help me formulate ideas more concretely by bringing into the forefront of my mind things that have been done elsewhere that maybe I haven't thought about. It's using technology as a thought-provoking catalyst for myself. I rely a lot on technology. I'm attached to my phone, as you know, Liliana. I carry my laptop with me all the time. That's part of my workaholic style. So I found a way to balance out my use of technology to make my life easier, allowing me, for example, to be much more remote than before. So this year I have started a little bit of that digital nomads aspect. Most people now start calls with me, not asking me, how are you, Kenny? It's, where are you, Kenny?
Where are you?
Because most of the time you cannot tell the difference. And I think for me in 2030, that will definitely be my way of working is, unless you physically need to shake my hand, I can definitely be, working with my clients, with my colleagues from anywhere, on a beach in Thailand, at the top of a mountain, skiing in Switzerland, hiking in, the Rockies in Canada. Whatever it is, technology, I think, will keep me connected to people, family, friends, colleagues, and to support. Because we'll be honest, I work in mental health, but I also need help sometimes. I have bad days, I have support, I get burnt out. I need to access support. So technology will allow me to have that instant access to support wherever I am, whenever I need it. So I think 2030, things are going to develop a lot more, making that part even easier than it is now.
Yes. I think, we never imagined that remote working would be so easy during the pandemic. Before everything was very physical, every meeting, every training, and even counseling was very in person. And then all of a sudden, people like, oh, we don't need this. there's no actually obstacle. We can actually deliver a lot of value to our clients, and really collaborate intensively with our team without being in person, which is very interesting. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be in person. I think it's different, but not necessarily every day, and particularly not in a bland office space.
And actually what it's done, I find, is when you do meet in person, that meeting is so much more valuable.
Yes.
You put much more effort and you get so much more out of that meeting, from a relationship perspective. From a work perspective, we all know that's the problem with in-person meetings. You spend 15-20 minutes just gossiping or whatever, and then you only have 10 minutes left for work. These online meetings, you get right to it, you get it done. And then when you do have those in-person meetings, you can do that more important part of interacting with another human.
Getting to know
with another, exactly, building those relationships. So I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Yes.
Again, right?
So thank you so much, and good luck with your plan and having clients all over the world, and just traveling and giving value to your clients, and really transforming this industry, which is something that I'm also very passionate about, and we are working together at EAEF.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Kenny, and
thank you. All right. Take care, everyone.